What's up, everybody? Schuyler Callihan here, along with Christopher Hall. It's another edition of Between the Ears. And yes, we are going to make our season predictions today. We're going to go game by game. But before we do all that, I want to kind of lay out the expectations first, because I think when you look at this year's team, you start to see all the returning pieces. You see the pieces that they've added via the transfer portal from the high school ranks, and you start to get a little giddy, right? Like, it's like, oh my goodness, like this is kind of the first time in I don't know how many years, maybe since 2018, really, since there's been this much hope or this much optimism going into the season. But Chris, like this schedule is, it's pretty tough. And I know Neil tried to downplay it a little bit earlier in fall camp and said, well, everyone said that about the schedule last year. And in hindsight, it wasn't as hard as everyone thought. And that's true. But I mean, I think this one's actually going to probably stick more towards what we feel like in the preseason. This is going to be a challenging slate.
Yeah, and the thing is, all those games were challenging last year. What do you want to look at a team or not? A lot of those teams that weren't good still played a lot of teams close. So it wasn't like they were terrible teams. They weren't playing the Rutgers or the Vanderbilts of the world, right? So it's not like they were really terrible teams. They were just average teams in a good conference. So we'll see how it all plays out. But when you kind of look around the league, there's a lot of new coordinators, transfer quarterbacks. How does it
New
all
teams.
gel? It can all optimism's great, but then it can all fall apart when you're adding a bunch of pieces. It's going to be a fun year in the Big 12. I think, obviously, it gets said a lot. It's the most open year in the league. I don't know if it's as open as people think, but I think there's, right there between 2 through 6, 2 through 7. When you kind of look at it, it might be crammed, just crammed together there,
Yeah.
and probably where you can flip a coin amongst those teams of who's really the better team.
I was going through and did my preseason Big 12 power rankings, and like I got to be honest with you, it was a lot more fun and a lot easier when there was just 10 teams in the league, because it took me maybe 35, 40 minutes to do. Now that there's 16 and you have four new teams this year, you have the four last year that you're still trying to learn. It's a lot to keep up with, and especially when we get to the season, like we'll do this every week where we have the power rankings of the Big 12, but those first 3 weeks when it's all non-conference games for the most part, like that's 16 different games now that we're gonna have to pay attention to. But we'll do that. We'll take care of that for you. At the end of this episode, we'll kind of talk about whether or not our predictions are so-called satisfactory for what this year should be, and maybe if it's a disappointment. So we'll get into all that, but let's just go ahead and get right into it. Starting 2 weeks from yesterday, West Virginia kicks off the season against number 8 Penn State. Now, again, last year, that game never really felt like West Virginia was going to have a chance. It was going to be a tough environment for them to go into. You had no idea what you were going to get out of Garrett Green. You had no idea what you were going to get out of that team as a whole. And I think they kind of surprised some people. They hung around for a half. They had some missed opportunities. Things kind of got away from there in the third, fourth quarters, but they hung around, I think, better and probably a little bit longer than what most, and myself included, probably would have thought going into that one. So this year, a little different. You get them at home. It's the first game of the season. There's a lot of hope, a lot of optimism, like we said. I kind of feel like there's a chance here. I don't know that I'm, quite there to where I'm going to pick them, because I'm not. So, spoiler, I'm going to go Penn State here. But I think in my 50 predictions article, I put they were going to either lead or be tied with Penn State at the half. So another sign of progress that they're going to be competing with top 10 team at the half. I just don't think they have enough to get across the finish line to beat this team. This is a very talented Penn State team, especially defensively. They have NFL guys littered all over the place. They hang tough, but I think they're going to fall short.
Yeah, this one's much tougher to predict than last year for sure. I think I gave them like 2% chance to win last year or something, just to give a percentage. That's why they play the game. Wasn't too surprised on outcome, honestly, last year. Probably a little surprised it was only one score, maybe instead of like a touchdown and a field goal
Yeah.
at the half. But this year, this one was kind of tough for me. I really feel good about West Virginia going into this game. The only problem I have is kind of mentioned it, the defense. They'll have the speed to keep up with Garrett Green and Jaheim White. I, it, you know, it's
They're going to
really
have to
about
throw it well.
Yeah, and it's about one-on-one matchups, especially when you're playing against a team that's going to be, on paper better than you right now. Um, it's really going to come down to one-on-one matchups, and going into it, you got to give Penn State the edge. Um, Another big reason I really kind of like West Virginia in this game is they have a new offensive and defensive coordinator. So getting all the communication, what they want, how much have they really changed? How much are they veering off of from last year? Drew Allard didn't really impress last season. His best game coincidentally was against West Virginia, but when you go back and look, there was a couple dropped interceptions. Can they
Yeah,
change their
there was.
fortunes around this year in Morgantown? That's really going to be different. So he didn't really do lights out. It was really, when you think about it, West Virginia kind of beat themselves a little bit, and they didn't let Garrett Green loose. They were trying to keep him confident. Didn't want to kind of throw him to the wolves week one. So this one was tough for me. I'm picking Penn State. Really wanted to pick West Virginia on this, but when it comes down to it, is West Virginia ready to knock off a program like Penn State? I always say Penn State's a little overrated. Granted, they do have to go against Ohio State and Michigan every single season. That's rough. But they do handle their business against the rest of the bad Big Ten teams, right? Like, it's rare that they play those kind of close games. So I'm going to give the edge to Penn State, but I would not be surprised at all if West Virginia ended up pulling off this upset. But I think in the end, Penn State does enough to find a way, and I think it stays within the score.
I do too. I'm interested to see what that line kind of finishes at. If it's around a touchdown, I think it'd be worth taking the points. It'd be nice if it was over 7.5, which I think it probably will be, but I'm not really sure. We'll have to see on that. But I mean, to your point, Garrett Green was kind of held back a little bit in that game. And
He was held back a lot, so
yeah.
it's
And at that
it's
point,
a little different this year. They didn't have the talent, like the athletic talent at a receiver, I think, last year
and that's
either.
that's where I was going. Like you had Cortez Braham and Jeremiah Aaron as two of your top four receivers on the depth chart to begin the year last year. Those two guys didn't even last through the first month of the season. So
Right.
you've got different answers there. You now know what you have in Jaheim White. Last year he wasn't even a factor at this point in the season. You have better depth on the defense at all three levels. So yeah, I mean it is. I think nationally probably going to be something that everyone just kind of glosses over and says, Penn State's going to go handle business. But I don't think that they're giving West Virginia the
All
love
right.
that they
It's
deserve.
it. It's honestly, like, to me, if I'm gonna pick an upset, it's West
This could
Virginia.
be the one.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I feel really good about West Virginia's chances. It's just as you go through this schedule, it's kind of talked about. Every week's a grind,
Yeah.
so there's going to be losses. And right now, this is one of them. I really thought I was going to pick this one and kind of give West Virginia a boost going into Big 12, but just
Talk
can't yet.
yourself out of it.
Maybe when maybe game week when we do our game prediction, I change
Yeah.
my mind. But as of right now, it's just I cannot pick West Virginia.
These predictions are tentative, of course, unless we end up being perfect at the end of the year, then we'll stay as they are. So we'll move to week two. And this is kind of an interesting game, Chris, because I mean, usually you think, you got an FCS opponent sandwiched in here between Penn State and Pitt. It should be an easy win. And I don't think there's going to be any worry here against Albany, but this is a pretty solid FCS team. I mean, they went to the FCS semifinals a year ago. I think they won like 10 or 11 games or something like that. They had some big time players that moved up a level because of how well they played. They went and transferred to Power Five schools. West Virginia was in on a couple of those guys. I don't think it's going to be anything to be nervous about or that they're going to have to sweat about, but I don't know that this is going to be your 59-7 type of game. I think this one's going to be a little bit tighter. It might kind of get on the nerves of West Virginia fans for a little bit. It might take them a little while to get going, but I just don't see this being this massive blowout like it looks like on paper.
Yeah, win or lose against Penn State, probably a slow start.
Yeah.
They win, kind of congratulating themselves a little bit, a little wake up call in the first half. Lose, obviously emotional, probably emotional loss, same situation. But I think they handled it. If you look at what Neil Brown's done against these kind of teams, outside James Madison, that was the first year that he was
Yeah.
there, and he was replacing pretty
Oof,
much the
don't
whole
bring that
roster.
one back up. That was
Yeah.
ugly.
So when they lost everybody. So it's kind of not surprising. But one, I don't think it's never going to be in doubt. But yeah, like you said, a little closer. Obviously, West Virginia cruises though.
Backyard brawl back in Pittsburgh this year at Acrisure Stadium. Pitt had a 3-win year last year and lost a ton of talent in the portal, especially on the defense side of the ball. I don't really know what Pitt is going to look like at season's end, but I kind of find it hard to believe that they're going to find this many answers in time by week 3 to go in this game, what regardless of where it's being played, because obviously in this game, home or away really doesn't matter for West Virginia, except for maybe 2 years ago and the first time they played in a decade. But this is kind of probably going to feel more like the old Big East backyard brawls where West Virginia fans will probably actually take over the stadium for sure because Pitt's coming off a 3-win year. You've already had that kind of excitement of having the brawl back there. I just don't see Pitt hanging around in this game. And to be quite honest with you, I think this is like a 2-3 score game.
Yeah, I'm confident they win by three or more touchdowns. Wouldn't be surprised if Neil Brown takes a page out of Don Nealon's book from '98 and just pours it on
Why
Pitt in the
not? Go
Pitt in the
for
fourth
it.
quarter. Why not? Because quite frankly, Pitt got lucky 2 years ago. Lose your best defender on the first series. Um, Obviously, the tip pass went right through Bryce Ford. The kid was beat so bad, the pass went through his hands.
Yeah.
5 yards down the field, it was intercepted. That's how bad he was beat. They got a break on a what was it, a second and long on a pass that clearly hit the ground that they reviewed and still called it a catch. West Virginia didn't get the same break. They're at the end of the game, right there at what, the 2 or 3 yard line. They got lucky, and if Garrett Green was healthy in that Pitt game last year, it would have been a complete. I mean, they dominated. I know they only scored 17, but they physically just beat the shit out of them. So this year they're going to let it loose. I would. I mean, this could be 30 points. This is probably they're going to put it to them and let them know that West Virginia is far better program. This nonsense out here, it's not even close. They've gotten
Yeah.
lucky. They got lucky during the Pickett year where they won the ACC. Like it's just nothing but luck.
Yeah. And I
Luck's run
mean,
out. Luck's run out. I think their luck's run out. When you win 3 games, their luck is clearly run out.
yeah.
And you just
And
said
again,
a 3-win team lost all their talent.
yeah. And when you lose that much talent, like it'd be one thing if you can patch it up with something in the transfer portal, but even then, like we've seen how it worked in Colorado. Like you can't just bring in a massive transfers and everything's going to be fixed overnight. That's just not how it's going to happen. And I know they kind of figured some things out last year towards the end of the year at the quarterback spot, but I just don't think there's any firepower there. And again with Pitt, this is going to be interesting. And I'll get a little off topic here, but to watch how this thing unfolds for them and Pat Narduzzi moving forward, because we all know like Pitt doesn't have the strongest, biggest fan base. They don't have these big boosters that pour in millions of dollars to probably their NIL fund or whatever. So how are they going to be able to compete in this new era of college football or athletics for that matter? I don't really know, especially when you're coming off a 3-win year. It's fine. It's hard for me to believe that they're going to be able to go back to being a top tier team in the ACC. And yeah, I think those days are behind them. So yeah,
They
West
they
Virginia wins this
they
one.
rarely competed in the old model. So
Yeah, exactly. So let's move forward off the brawl to Kansas. This is the first Big 12 game, Big 12 opener, and it's kind of a little scary here because you had 2 years ago, you went and played at Pitt, you lost, you come back home, you open up Big 12 play with who? Kansas. So a little eerie feeling here, but I don't know. I mean, there's all this talk about Jalen Daniels, and rightfully so. He's a great quarterback, good dual threat kid, but he's not been on the field a whole lot. He played 6 games 2 years ago. They won all the first 6 games. He gets hurt. They kind of fall apart in the second half of the season. Last year, he only plays in 3 games. They win all three. Then you saw kind of what happened. They were able to kind of be a little bit more competitive than they were 2 years ago, but still not nearly the same team with him on the field. Is he going to be on the field September 21st? I don't know. Even if he is, I think West Virginia, from a depth perspective, is in a much, much better place. Kansas may have the more proven talent in terms of guys like Devin Neal, Kobe Bryant, so on and so forth. But I feel good about this one. This feels like a back and forth kind of old Big 12 game, but more so on the ground. It's going to be a high scoring game, but I think West Virginia pulls away.
yeah, this one you could kind of toss up, but I'm giving West Virginia the edge. Um, Same reason, kind of want that payback without a doubt. You want that payback. Kind of same again, same situation, same scenario. No letdown. I think yeah, this could be a 48-45 game,
Yeah.
without a doubt. Big 12, complete old Big 12 score. Of course, now they'll probably come out and play like 10-7. It'll be like a defensive
Just to prove
defensive
us goose wrong.
defensive battle. But yeah, I'm giving West Virginia. I gave West Virginia the edge on this.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing with it too is I think if you played them a little bit later, it might be a different feeling even at home, but with it being the Big 12 opener, I mean, this team knows it has to get off to the right start in Big
Also
12 play or else.
mentioned that Daniels lost his offensive coordinator who went to Penn State,
Right.
um, who's trying to find some offense for a Lars. So yeah, again, kind of you might be just catching them at the right time early in the year. We'll have to see how it all shakes out with them offensively with the new coordinator.
Feels like there's never a good time to catch Oklahoma State. They're next on the road in Stillwater,
You have
and
West Virginia's number. Just
yeah,
man,
it has been brutal, and Stillwater has been a place, a house of horrors for them. They won 2 years ago, and I think the only other time they won was what 2014, Clint Trickett and that bunch out there. So it has not been kind to them, but they've played okay out there for the most part. They've been able to stay in some of these games until kind of like the end, and some weird stuff usually happens. But Oklahoma State, they bring back Ollie Gordon. They bring back Alan Bowman, who's, I think, going for his second doctorate degree now. And they also have a pretty talented defense. And, well, I should say maybe a more talented defense than they had a year ago. Their secondary was not very good. I think they're going to take a step up this year. I just can't see them going on the road in Stillwater and beating this team. I get the schedule kind of sets up nice for West Virginia here because if memory serves me correct, I think Oklahoma State plays Utah and Kansas State leading into this game. Could be wrong on that, but West Virginia, it feels like a decent spot again to kind of catch Oklahoma State, but I just don't know that there is a perfect spot to do that. So I'm going to go with the Fighting Mike Gundy's.
yeah, and they just always have West Virginia's number for some reason. Yeah, like something always happens in the end that West Virginia falls short. I think this is where no matter what happens against Penn State, West Virginia loses this game. Solely based off history. If they're going to have a special season, especially if you want to get to Dallas, so this would be a great way to kind of set the table for them the rest of the way out. But yeah, I got this one as a loss as well. Ollie Gordon, obviously great running back, probably going to try for a Heisman run this year. Alan Bowman, more than a capable quarterback, been there forever, knows the ins and outs. So we'll see how they shake out. I know they've probably not performed to the level of Gundy uh, had prior to the last 3 or 4 seasons where he's always kind of bounced back. He hasn't really done that yet, but kind of see where this program's going this year, especially when they have now they are kind of like usually when they have expectations, they fall apart. They've always kind of
Right.
come out of nowhere, kind of that West
Well,
Virginia feel.
last year we all thought they weren't even going to get bowl eligible. I mean,
Right.
they lost to
So
South Alabama by dang near 30 points. I mean,
we'll have to see where they're at, but I did for whatever reason they just have their number. So this is a loss for me as well.
so yes, they do play Utah and Kansas State leading into that game. So you got to imagine they're going to be pretty physically beaten up. And West Virginia, which makes me feel a little bit more, better about their chances in this one. They're going to actually have a bye going into that game. So maybe that's again another one we get the game week. Like, yeah, maybe this is one where West Virginia does pull away and steal one on the road. But for now, I think we're going to both go with the loss. So coming back home, they're going to take on Anthony Beck's son, Rocco, who is completely cemented himself as the starting quarterback for the Cyclones. Felt like they were off to a really rocky start at the beginning of last year. They kind of started to find their way a little bit. The one weird thing about last year with Iowa State is they could never find the running game. Abu Samaf kind of provided a little bit of that, but that's very odd for a Matt Campbell coach team that they could not really run the football. I don't see that being the case 2 years in a row. I think they're going to be a little bit better, but from a program standpoint, and this is weird to say because 2 years ago it felt like West Virginia was trying to carbon copy what Iowa State was doing and being physical in the trenches, have depth at tight end, be really good in the front seven. Kind of feels like it's flipped a little bit. I feel like West Virginia's in a little bit better spot. This one being at home, you want to bounce back. You can't have two straight losses this early on. I think West Virginia wins this one, but maybe by 10 or 14 points.
I don't know if it's going to be by that much, but I have West Virginia winning as well. Basically, same sentiment. West Virginia's kind of flipped the script, I think, in this series. I think they can match physicality, and I think they have better talent at the skill positions. I think by then, defensively, um, you mentioned the bye week before Oklahoma State, but after that, I think this is where defensively they really start turning it on, really kind of find their groove and really get their personnel to where they want it in different sub packages. So Iowa State always plays really good defense. Can see them containing Garrett Green, White, Donaldson, and whoever the receiver probably at this point is Jaden Bray. Will be the leading receiver, and then Cole Taylor. I think they'll have enough defensively. They've always schemed they scheme pretty well every week. Been tough to kind of keep it consistent throughout the Big 12, but they're one of those programs that's kind of been on the edge of evolutionizing defenses. I mean, when you think
Yeah.
about it, everyone was kind of like you said, carbon copying what they were doing. Well, a lot of people were kind of looking at what Iowa State was doing defensively because they were kind of containing everybody. So I expect them to kind of keep that trend and be able to keep close. But home game for West Virginia, I think they kind of keep the momentum going and they get a win.
Yeah, Iowa State, they do such a good job with kind of drawing up their, their coverages and everything. It feels like, and I don't know if it was Neil that said this or maybe it was a previous quarterback, but it feels like there's like 11 or 12 defensive backs on the field when you play them because they have a 3-3-5 scheme, but the way they bring things and present things, it's so hard to understand. I mean, you go back to 2018, Will Greer, that was his worst game. West Virginia was ranked sixth in the country at that point, and no one, I mean, I guess some people probably saw that one coming because Ames is a house of horse for everyone in the Big 12. But yeah, that's a tough defense to go against. So I think they're gonna have to run the ball on that. So second game of a critical two-game homestand. They're going to have Kansas State coming to town. And the last 2 years, I've been really, really high on Kansas State. I've picked them to go to the Big 12 championship each of the last 2 years. And I'm high on them again, but I'm not quite as high on them. And I think a lot of that's just because of the uncertainty at quarterback. Avery Johnson, in theory, should be an improvement over Will Howard, but I've got to see a little bit more. We only saw a small sample size from him last year. He's a dual threat kid, former 5 star, but I need to see him throw the ball with more efficiency and see him do it week after week. However, I don't see West Virginia coming into this or out of this 2 game homestand 2-0. I feel like they're going to drop one of these games just because the physicality of the schedule is going to start to kind of wear and tear on them. This feels like one where you feel good about it going into it, but they find a way to miraculously lose it. So I think they're going to drop this one to Kansas State.
Yeah, I think this is a year where they protect home field. I'm going West Virginia. Getting that momentum back with a win over Iowa State. Be interesting to see where Iowa State is in the rankings at that point. If they kind of start stacking wins early in the year because
Kansas
they're
State.
receiving votes. No, I'm saying Iowa State
Oh, Iowa
gets some
State. Gotcha.
momentum going into Kansas State, seeing where they're at to get even probably gain more momentum and get back on track after Oklahoma State. So I got Kansas State, same thing. I'm gonna be hypocritical here soon, but um, just not a lot of unknowns with Kansas State going into the year. Get them at home. If it's on the road, I'd probably say, well, maybe that's the time. Kansas State is struggling with the new quarterback or where they're at. Is this the time they get punched in the mouth? But I'm optimistic on West Virginia's defense and what they're going to be able to do up front. So I like West Virginia's chances at home with this one. I think it's just, offense should be rolling at that time. They won't be able to keep up offensively. I think West Virginia pulls away, 2 possession game by the end.
When the schedule came out, I think you and I talked about it, and we chalked this one up as a loss from the very beginning. Going out to Tucson to play the Arizona Wildcats. And I'd say I've had that feeling since the moment it came out all the way up until maybe a couple of weeks ago. And I started doing some more in depth stuff, kind of understanding where everyone's at heading into the year before I did my Big 12 power ranking article. And I don't feel as strong about it now. I'm still picking Arizona, but this feels like a game where West Virginia could go in and win because of the offensive firepower that they have. Arizona's got a new coaching staff. They've got some question marks. on both sides of the ball, even though they have a really good quarterback, wide receiver tandem, and Fafita and McMillan. I just don't know that Arizona, on paper, they look like they're a top 25 team, but by the season's end, like they may end up being 7-5 or 8-4, a team that kind of underachieves a little bit because they don't have maybe the talent that they had a year ago. So I think Arizona finds a way to hold off WVU in this one, but I'm not as certain as I was about it, say, a month ago.
Yeah, this is where I get a little hypocritical because all the, all the unknowns kind of going in with Arizona, and you mentioned them, so I'm not going to really repeat that. But the new head coach, how many times have you seen it work out for the new head coach because there's the best in both worlds? But how many? That's usually like the anomaly. It's not the standard.
Right.
Usually goes the other way. So probably a disappointing season for them, considering they're probably around their fan base probably excited with the quarterback, receiver going into the season. I know they're like on Heisman watch and all that. The quarterback is anyway. So I have West Virginia losing this game as well. I like you just said we both didn't feel good about this game from the standpoint they get a week off. I think after, but having to play, but is back to back games at home against two tough teams and traveling out west. Probably end up being a night game there since West Virginia is going to be the East team. I don't see them playing. I mean, they could play noon out there. That's what West Virginia time 3 o'clock. So I think
Yeah.
West Virginia has the advantage, regardless of of West Virginia doesn't have the advantage, but there's not going to be that time difference. Uh, won't be a factor. It's the travel, and I think playing in a new environment might get them. I just don't like that game. That's a game where they bust a big play early, and then they kind of ride the momentum. West Virginia kind of stops it, but can never catch enough momentum uh, to overcome the early deficit. So I think Arizona kind of jumps out on them early. West Virginia can never just catch back up and get even tied. I think they can get back within the score, but I think just one of those another weird game, right? I
It
think
is.
it's like one of those Pac-12 teams that just finds a way that would find a way to beat West Virginia. It's just like one of those random old conference teams that would fiund a way to beat West Virginia, even though probably on paper heading into it, West Virginia should win.
South Florida.
At that point in the season, probably West Virginia might be the favorite. You know what I mean? If we both think what Arizona may struggle early on a little bit, but we'll see. But yeah, I got Arizona getting up early and holding them off.
So at this point, you have them at 2 losses, 1 in league play. Um, I've got them at 2. So
No, I got them losing to
regardless,
Oklahoma. That's my third loss. Penn State, Oklahoma
oh, that's right,
State.
Oklahoma State. Okay, yeah, you're right. So at this point, you're gonna almost have to win out to get to the Big 12 championship game. Good thing is the schedule starts to lighten up, very much
Hopefully,
so.
we think it
So
might.
at least on paper. Now, who
Yeah,
knows? Maybe this is the toughest stretch, and we got it all wrong. But on paper, it looks like this is where
unlikely.
things
It's
start to
probably
lighten.
all wrong.
So going to the first game in November, go and play Cincinnati on the road, old Big East opponent. They took care of business against them last year, seemingly right from the rip. And I just don't think Cincinnati is in a good spot right now. You know, I question the hire of Scott Satterfield. I get he's well respected around as an offensive mind, but I just didn't understand it. He didn't have a whole lot of success at Louisville and kind of felt like that Dana Holgerson situation at West Virginia where really wasn't doing enough at West Virginia. So instead of getting fired, he just went ahead and took a lesser job. Kind of felt like the same thing there with Satterfield. But I just don't think Cincinnati's in a good spot. I think depth wise, they're in a really tough spot. They have no answer at quarterback right now. They have two really high end players, Corey Connor at running back, Dante Corleone at defensive tackle. But outside of that, it's a lot of unknowns. And I think Cincinnati's probably going to be hopeful that they can get to 4 or 5 wins this year. I don't even know if that's going to happen. So even though it's on the road, I think West Virginia wins this one comfortably and probably very similar to what we saw a year ago in Morgantown.
I don't know if it'll be comfortable, but I feel like that's one of those Garrett Green moments where he puts it away with another score with about 4 or 5 minutes left in the latter stages of the game. Um, kind of building off everything you said. I've never been a fan of the Satterfield. Didn't think he was thought it was a downgrade really for Cincinnati for to hire him, but it might be one of those situations where they couldn't bring anybody in because they really don't have the NIL. You can kind of use the Pitt same arguments that Pitt has, right? They
Right.
just don't have the alumni. So yeah, it's gonna be they're gonna be an interesting study. Are they gonna be like are they gonna be the bottom feeders of this conference because of that? Because you look around the league, everyone's kind of shoring up their NIL. Cincinnati's one of those programs where you're kind of questioning, will they have the depth to really compete? You know, we saw it firsthand when West Virginia first got in the Big 12. Man, you started losing guys throughout the year, a game here, a game there. The guys behind them really couldn't fill in that void. So, be interesting, you know, another program to kind of watch, see where they kind of go. Not that they've ever really been anywhere close to a blue blood, but they've always had chances. They had those run of coaches, Butch Jones, Brian Kelly. It just seemed like they were just kept finding a new coach for a big program,
Yeah,
for the next
leaping
big
pad.
for the yeah, they pretty much lean pad, but they just kept the success going. So they're kind of an interesting study. Does that kind of happen? Do they get lucky, or does that luck kind of run out? But yeah, I think it might be tighter than what you like in this one, but I think that's where another game where kind of Garrett Green just does something phenomenal at the end to kind of shut the door on him at the end.
It feels like it was a decade ago that Dave Aranda and the Baylor Bears won the Big 12 championship because it has not gone well for them ever since. 3-9 a year ago, and somehow was able to keep his job. I actually probably think it was the right decision to keep him at least for another year to see what happens. But I mean, he is a guy he's on thin ice right now, and he's got to win games. He's got to get bowl eligible. I don't know that he's got to go 8-4 or 9-3, but they've got to show some signs of progress because last year was an absolute mess on both sides of the ball. I don't know that they've really found a whole lot of answers, and that's a tough thing for Dave Aranda. He's a great defensive coach, probably one of the best defensive minds in all of college football. And maybe come December, he's going to be make a really good defensive coordinator for somebody. But I think with this game at home, even if it was on the road, I don't see any scenario where West Virginia loses this game.
Yeah, I don't think Baylor's ever won in Morgantown, correct? That's the Morgantown game, or is it on the road?
That's that's right. I don't think they've
That's
ever
at home.
beat
Yeah, they've never
West
won.
Virginia.
I'm pretty sure they've never won in
Yeah,
Morgantown.
because
Um,
it was the home team that was winning every game there for a while until West Virginia won a couple.
yeah, that and that's the only thing that scares me because that sometimes it's going to have to break at some point. Don't think
Right.
it's here. I do think Aranda does turn it around. Probably wrong on it, but I think he's a good coach. Kind of a little bit of bad luck there. Again, kind of everyone's readjusting to the NIL, and a lot of people, I think, a lot of programs didn't realize, a fan base like West Virginia energized, be able to help just in small increments. But when you have that many fans support, even small increments, makes a difference. So I think this is a program that's going to find, that's going to get it. I think they're going to turn it around with him. Whether he's there 5 years down the road, I don't know, but I think he turns it around. But again, probably closer than some would like. But I feel, and here's another moment where, I West Virginia's feeling the pressure. They can't lose another one. They're finding way. Their playmakers are starting to make plays late in games to pull out these wins. Baylor's better than what you think on paper going in. I think they turn it around. West Virginia wins a close one at home.
Senior day in Morgantown is going to be against the UCF Knights, one of the newish members of the Big 12. They went and took care of business down in Orlando last year. This is on paper. Again, this is kind of a repetitive thing, but they look better. I don't know that they're a Big 12 contender though. And I've scratched my head at this all off season. Everybody and their brother seems to think UCF is going to the playoff or they're going
They're the
to
dark
be
horse.
yeah,
Everyone has them as a dark horse for some reason.
to
Yeah,
be a team that goes and finishes in the top 5 of the Big 12. I just don't see it. Like KJ Jefferson was pretty good at Arkansas, but he wasn't great. And I get he probably fits better under Gus Malzahn, what they're going to want to do. They have RJ Harvey back, one of the best running backs in the Big 12. Kobe Hudson, really good receiver. They got some good defensive backs. But again, as we've talked about umpteen times already with these newer teams that made the jump up, the depth is a major question mark. And I just don't think they're there quite yet. And by this point in the season, game 11, probably going to be dealing with some stuff. So I don't see them coming into Morgantown winning on senior day. You mean to tell me that UCF is going to come to Morgantown and beat Garrett Green in his final home game? That ain't happening.
Exactly. And UCF West Virginia played them in October, I believe, last year, right? UCF,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
and
Late
maybe in the later
October.
stages. So I said last year that about every new Big 12 team, if they were going to have the depth, that was going to be a win. I knew that was going. I had no problem with that game whatsoever. Same situation. They're not Big 12 ready yet. I don't. People still don't realize how much time it takes. Like we're seeing it in Morgantown still, right? Like West Virginia lost everything and could never get it back because the game changed all of a sudden,
Yep.
and they didn't have the full functioning NIL. And you can see it week in, week out, just how much they struggle. I think UCF has a pretty good NIL. I think that's a program that'll eventually get to a point where it can be potentially a contender. I don't know if it'll be a
You got a
perennial
great
contender.
recruiting hotbed.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be a perennial contender, but it's a program that can compete, but
They could be
not
like
this
what
season.
Baylor was when West Virginia first entered the conference. You have bigger schools in your state, but you can still find a way to be successful.
Absolutely, and like you said, it's a hotbed of recruiting. There's plenty of talent, plenty of kids get overlooked there, and that's a beautiful campus. And when you're in a place that in a program that has an AQ for the playoff, um, you're going to have some sway. So
Yeah.
they can definitely start pulling a lot of recruits, especially when you kind of look where Florida's at right now. Like they're
They're
not
just
winning.
stumbling, bumbling along right
And
now.
you look at Miami, like they're not winning, and that's not even a good conference. So um, I same thing. I don't think this game's ever in doubt. Probably dealing with the emotions of the opening. Neil Brown talks about it a lot. You have to deal with it's going to be an emotional from Garrett Green, obviously, but I think he kind of rides it. Again, probably closer, a little closer than some people like at halftime, but I think second half they just kind of pull away. Could see it being a three-score game around 17 points.
Wrapping up the season in one of the places no one likes to play in the Big 12, and that's Lubbock against Texas Tech. And this one just, had I picked some other games a little differently, I may have picked this one as a loss. I'm going to pick it as a win just because I feel like 8 is a really good, strong, solid number for this team. And I couldn't really get myself to be convinced to go the other way on some of these other games. But this one is a scary game. It's the end of the year. Texas Tech's probably not playing for much other than maybe just to get bowl eligible or maybe to increase, their bowl slot. But this is a game where West Virginia could be playing for something. Maybe if we're wrong on our predictions and they're a little bit better, and maybe Texas Tech wants to play spoiler, and that's a perfect place to do it. Last game of the year, their senior day. You, I'm assuming with it being what November 30th, there's probably going to be some weird winds going on down there, which is always the case. It's a weird game. I think Joey McGuire is probably underachieved a little bit to this point. They've had injuries like crazy last year, especially with quarterback Tyler Shuck going
Had
down
a lot
against
of
West
bad. He's had a
Virginia.
lot of bad luck.
Yeah, they've had ton, a ton of injuries. If anybody deserves to continue to get a little bit more time and have more patience with, it's Joey McGuire. But again, I just feel like West Virginia is tougher. They're physical. They're going to be able to run the football, and that's going to be the difference in this game. I don't I don't know that Texas Tech can offset what Taj Brooks does in the running game with Baron Morton at quarterback. Garrett Green, he's proven he can pass it. I think he's going to be an improved passer this year. The balanced attack for me is what is the differential maker in this one.
Yeah, this one was a tough for me as well. I'm kind of worried that we've thought very similar throughout.
Yeah, that's
uh,
never a good sign.
um, yeah, I said what a couple weeks ago, West Virginia 8-4. There was two games that I didn't know. Optimism with Penn State, which I take took that. I'm taking that as an L right now though. But Texas Tech, yeah, this one's a weird one. Haven't won out there since Neil Brown took over. So they are due. But I think when we if mine's going to be right, and I hope I'm wrong in a more positive end. But I think when you look back, uh, basically here's my reasoning. You take that Arizona loss, and they're down to 2 losses in my scenario. And they're really going to have to fight for a Big 12 spot. I think Big 12 championship is going to come down. I don't know if anyone is going to go perfect in Big 12 conference play, so it's probably going to be a 1 or 2 and a 2 loss team in there. So West Virginia is still probably going to be fighting for a spot in that end, and it's going to go back to that Cincinnati game coming off an
Yep.
Arizona loss. I'm saying Garrett Green makes a play at the end, and they're going to give themselves a fighting chance towards the end. I think it's going to be another situation. I don't know if it'll be Garrett Green. Maybe it's Green and a break connection, a Hudson connection, whoever. Someone's going to have to make a play at the end, and I'm going to give West Virginia the edge. They focused on this the last 2 seasons that their playmakers have to come up. They've been coaching these guys the last 2 seasons, so I think this is one of those situations where if West Virginia is going to go to Dallas, and I think they can if they win this game, that one of those guys is going to have to make a play. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be Jaheim White making a big run, CJ Donaldson doing something. Somebody's going to make a big play at the end of the game for them to take the win, and that will give them their ninth win. Still leaning 8-4, but I think they pull it out. I've kind of been 9-3 all season. Going through it, you made me do it a week early. This is where I was like, all right, well, here we are. I gotta find 3 or 4 losses. And I think really in all 3 losses here,
They're all winnable. Every game is
you
winnable
kind
on
of
this schedule.
interchange maybe some here and there. But I got them protecting the home field and finishing with a road win. So we'll see. I think that will be enough to get them to Dallas. We'll have to see how the tiebreakers work out. But I
Yeah.
think they do. If they do get to that Dallas, it'll be Utah, and that's where I don't think they've taken that next step to beat Utah. Washington will be more physical this year. We'll be better at the skill positions, but Whittingham, we were trying to figure out what year this was before we got on for
Yeah.
Whittingham. This is be his 20th season, if I'm correct. They've been doing this for a long time there, and they've built that culture. I don't want to
Seven,
say Neil
10 win
Brown's
seasons.
replicating so much, but similar. Like they want to be physical and be able to have playmakers, and they've been doing it for a long time. And I'm not 100% convinced it'll be Utah, but if it's not Utah, maybe Oklahoma
Oklahoma
State. I don't
State.
know.
Yeah.
I like that's where it is. Like I don't know if Utah's ready. Like yes, they played in the Pac-12 and they played great programs, but I don't think they're really they're probably ready for the grind of the Big 12. I'm not going to say that, but I don't know if they understand that there's not a cow on the schedule. Oregon State turned it around recently, but Stanford's been bad. Like they've gotten some teams down in the Pac-12 where there's not that many bad teams in the Big 12. So probably a couple more losses than they've expected. Maybe it's a bunch of 2 loss teams. But like it's going to
Might
be.
be.
That's why I think it's interesting. Like that there may be a team that clears above everybody else, but I'm not 100% convinced yet because, again, Utah's going to be new. Geographically, they'll be okay. I think culturally, they're okay. Like I said, Whittingham's been there for a while, but I think really overall, I think that's my pick for the Big 12 is Utah reluctantly, just because I don't know.
Who's
I want
better?
to see a Big 12.
Who's going to be
Yeah,
more
like
consistent?
could be Oklahoma State. And I mean, they could be the ones like, no, we are the Big 12 now. Like, maybe they got that chip on their shoulder. Gundy's definitely proven good coach. And with Kansas, like we talked about Kansas State, West Virginia is more. I don't know if they're ready for it, but maybe they go knock off Oklahoma State. Maybe they hold off against Arizona.
Awesome.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, so you're at 9-3. Your three losses were Penn State, Arizona, and remind me, Oklahoma
Oklahoma
State.
State, yeah.
So, and I have Penn State, Oklahoma State, Arizona, and Kansas State. So I got them at 8-4. You have them at 9-3. If you want to feel good about these predictions, again, Chris has been right on this on the dot 2 years straight.
I
So,
was actually when I thought about that 2022 was
ah,
bad, but we
oh,
lost everything. It wasn't wasn't bad, but it was off. I think I had them at 8 wins and they went how many wins did they have 2022? 5?
in 22. So we're talking JT Daniels year, right?
Yeah,
5-7.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so
it was
anyways,
awful.
but he got last year right. He got last year right on the dot. So don't worry.
And there's far
That's
less question marks going into this season than that. So, and to be fair, like they lost Charles Woods right off the rip on a defense that couldn't afford
yeah.
to lose anybody, especially in the spot. Couldn't afford to lose anybody, and you lose that. So whatever.
No, so I mean, you got last year correct, and then also if you want to take kind of the formula from last year, I picked them to go 6-6. They go 8-4. Say history repeats itself. I say 8-4. They bump it up and go 10-2. Either way, you're going to be pretty happy, I would think, with a 9 or 10 win season.
I feel kind of good about 10-2 to be honest. Like I wanted to pick them to 10 win, but I think they get their 10th win in the bowl.
Yeah,
Like if you
I
look at
think
the
that's
progression of programs usually progress, you're going to see that this year. Bowl matchups will be obviously it's different now. Like bowl matchups are just completely crazy now because of all the opt outs. You don't know who you're playing. If all they're opting out, your guy's opting out, you would think Garrett Green may stay, but whole of his season, where is he at health wise? Like you just don't know. So if they get the 10th win, I wouldn't be surprised because when you think about it, then Nico takes over. Like it's not that big of a deal. So kind of still have playmakers, and your receivers for the
should
most
be.
part will be returning next year. So
Yeah.
you got pretty good even as of right now going to a bowl game, but most of those guys are still going to be there, and that they will give themselves an opportunity to win the game.
Oh, and that's why I talked about. I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago on the show with Eugene. Is like even if this team doesn't get to the college football playoff, because I think everyone's expectation from a fan perspective is like, this is it. They're going to compete for the Big 12 championship. They're going to get into the college football playoff. You mean to tell me that there's 11 other teams in the country you're going to be better than this team? Yada, yada, yada. You bring this back to bring this
Yes.
back. Just calm down, relax. It's a natural progression. You rarely see a team that, in West Virginia's case, that had been bowl ineligible for 3 out of 4 years, finally get over the hump, win 9 games, and all of a sudden, boom, they're in the college football playoff, even in an expanded format. I think it's going to be a natural progression. You're going to get see, and even again, even in my scenario, you win 8 games again, you win a bowl game. 9-4 this year to me is still pretty impressive considering last year's schedule was supposedly easier. So I don't think it's the end of the world if you go 9-4 or if you go 10-3 and you don't make the college football playoff. It doesn't mean that they're never going to get there under Neil Brown. In fact, I think this is kind of the launching pad, really. This is just the
Right.
start of it because, like you just said, you bring everybody back a receiver. The offensive line, you're going to lose some pieces, but you feel pretty good about the guys they're grooming underneath of them.
Yeah.
Defensively, I mean, you're super young at linebacker. You've got some guys in the secondary you like moving forward. Defensive line you like. There's not a whole lot of, oh my gosh, like that's a major weakness for them in 2025 or 2026 feeling. If Nico just comes in and steps right in and is serviceable at worst, you're going to have a chance to compete for the Big 12 title for the next 2 years. So you're going to have a
Absolutely.
chance to get in. It doesn't have to happen this year.
Yeah, they've set themselves up good in recruiting. Like I think last year, if you when we go and look 3 years from now, you'll say that Duke's Mayo Bowl season is really what
Yes.
started it, and that was the first year Neil Brown was actually able to retain everybody. So yeah, it's still evolving. You're not gonna, hey, look, West Virginia go out and win 11 games this year and win the Big 12. Like it's very
Then you
possible.
really feel big, fat,
Yeah,
and
like
sassy about 2025.
it's very very possible. But when you're trying to build a championship program, you just mentioned the youth. Like I'm high on Josiah Trotter, but it's his first full season. I'm
Right.
high on Jaden Bray, but he hasn't proven it week in week out. But he's
Like
shown it
like
on
we
the
just talked
practice
about the
field. There's
receivers.
there's a lot. There's a lot that still has to happen. They're very young, and you still had you're a year from where Neil Brown didn't like the way they handled success. Like they still have to show that they can handle success in the middle of the season and prove that they can stack wins together and not overlook a team. Like there's still a lot of things that they have to prove to be a contender in the Big 12. Or again, when you're looking at Utah going in, if that's who they face, if you're going in the Big 12 title, they've been there and done championship games. West
Right.
Virginia has. So there's a lot to learn from this program standpoint. I think they've found their way in bowl games for the most part. Neil Brown's been successful in bowl games overall. So I think there's a few things that there's still learning curves. You're still learning in the NIL era as well. You're still learning in the recruiting your own guys. You're still learning a lot of things about really with NIL recruiting high school kids, how and how you're going to maintain that. I think it's definitely on the rise, but I think I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for a Big 12 championship, especially if you still lose two conference games, but then you end up, say they beat Penn State. Like, they may not necessarily have to beat Utah. Depending on how the rest
Yeah.
of Big 12 shakes out, they may still be considered a top 12 team at that time, even if they lose the Big 12 championship. So there is other ways to get in, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the 12 team shake plays out. We know it probably is going to be a heavily favored SEC, but I
Probably going to
think
get
if
3 or
you're
4
looking
of
at
each from
over,
each of those
not
conferences.
saying that Big Ten's not a good conference, but a very overrated conference is the Big Ten right now. And how's that shake out west? Like USC, UCLA, yes, they played everybody, but they didn't have to play Washington and Oregon every year. How does that affect those programs in the coming years? How's that affect the Big Ten in the coming years? So it'll be
Yeah.
very interesting to see how it all kind of shakes out over the years, especially since they're going to expand the playoffs to 14 or 16 here next year.
That's the talk. I don't know if there's an
So
official word
yeah,
on it.
I think the Big 12 is in good shape, and if you're West Virginia, people probably don't remember, but when they were in the Big East, they got a lot of respect from the media because they were winning. And then the Big East wasn't necessarily that great, but they were beating the Big East team. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. I think the Big 12 is in a good situation. And I think with the addition of Utah, I think Oklahoma State's been proven. I think this is, West Virginia's going to be right there in the mix, and they'll get that East Coast bias for sure as long as they keep winning. So I think they're in good shape, and I think this. I mean, if I'm looking at it realistically, I think in Nico's second and final year, that's your Big 12 championship team. Like, if that's what you're
Yep.
looking at, that's your best shot. And
It
that's
is
not even like
because
you look at it after that. If Rada Burton stays around, Khalil Wilkins develops. Like,
those kids are showing signs early,
and
and
you already talked about the running backs that they just brought in.
yeah.
Obviously,